In 1832, off the coast of the British colony of Newfoundland, a French schooner was working the Grand Banks, an area of relatively shallow water famed for its abundance of fish. But what was surprising was not what the ship was taking from the water, but instead what it had put in. Until this point, the common way to fish was by hand lining. Fishermen stood along the rail of the ship and lowered baited lines directly into the water by hand. Each line typically had one hook, sometimes a few, weighted so it dropped vertically. When a fish struck, the fisherman hauled it in manually. But the French here were trawling from small boats set off from the main ship, pulling very long lines with hundreds of baited hooks each, or sometimes nets or lobster pots depending on what you're trying to catch. This cannot be done from over the rail of an anchored schooner. It instead requires a small boat that puts out from the mother vessel, sets the net or lines, hauls them in, and returns with the catch. And it was this little boat that the French had put into the water that would change fishing on the Grand Banks forever. Some call them a dory, some a wherry, but either way the design is the same, a fully flat bottom and sloped sides, big enough to hold one or two men. Hiram Lowell knew dories. In Amesbury, Massachusetts, on the Merrimack River north of Boston, lies the Lowell Boat Shop. Here, Hiram's father, Benjamin Lowell, built dories his entire life, as had Hiram's grandfather, Simeon Lowell, who founded the shop in 1793. And because of what Hiram did here in the 1830s, his sons would spend their lives building dories too. In the late 18th century, the round-bottomed shallop, or chaloupe, was the standard small fishing boat. It was a better seakeeper than the dory, prettier on the water, and more expensive to build. In his 1790 ledger, boat builder St. James Topham of Marblehead recorded just how much more expensive. A round-bottomed chaloupe sold for £9, while a flat-bottomed dory cost just $3. The 1830s was the time of a great convergence of technological changes. A couple of decades prior, in the 1810s, Sister Tabitha Babbitt, supposedly inspired by her spinning wheel, had invented the circular saw. But being a deeply religious member of the Shaker sect, she never patented her invention, a choice that allowed it to spread quickly. By the early 1830s, water-powered mills were turning out flat boards throughout the U.S. in record quantities, and the abundant white pine and oak of New England was excellent for boat building. Another revolution, in making carpentry nails, I covered in my book The Pattern of Progress, how radically cheaper, easier, faster, better technologies and ideas rapidly changed the world. In the 1790s, nails were largely made individually from iron rod. A couple of decades later, they were largely thin wedges cut mechanically from flat iron sheets, and by the early 1830s, they were also machine-headed, dramatically decreasing their cost. The combination of pre-cut wooden boards and mass-produced nails would revolutionize fishing. The Lowells did not invent the dory. The basic form had been around for centuries. What the Lowells invented was the dory factory, systematized production where boat pieces were produced in bulk and then assembled. After a few design changes, Hiram Lowell would begin making a particular style of dory, the Banks Dory, from standardized and interchangeable parts, produced at volume, to a consistent specification, and able to be stacked on top of each other like plastic cups. Because the dories were cheap and stackable, fishing ships loaded up on them. Quickly, 16 dories, stored in 2 banks of 8, port and starboard, became the industry standard. This was IKEA before IKEA. Standardized parts, interchangeable, with boats produced at volume to a consistent specification, even assembled like IKEA furniture. When he was developing his automobile assembly line, Henry Ford said that the Lowell Boat Shop was part of his inspiration for how cars could be made. Adopting dory fishing, Gloucester, Massachusetts became the largest fishing port in the world. It is fair to say that Lowell's Grand Banks Dory built entire towns, from New England to Nova Scotia to Newfoundland and throughout the maritime provinces. Even the term maritime provinces grew up with the dory. You can see from this graph that I've made from Google's Ngram viewer, where they've taken and scanned millions of books and recorded how often various phrases occur in them, that in English language books, the occurrence of the phrase maritime provinces increased dramatically as the prevalence of the dory did too. The dory's century at the top of the fishing economy ended the way most disruptive innovations end. It was itself disrupted. After the 1910, the rise of the internal combustion engine, being made in large quantities for cars, made the small powerboat cheaper to operate per fish landed than a sailing schooner with its banks of dories. In the Dory book, 1987, John Gardner notes that by 1930, most of the dories were gone. The change came with the gasoline engine. The dory survives now mostly as a recreational craft, and Lowell's Boat Shop survives too, as the oldest continually operating boat building business in the United States.